If you didn't get a handout, they are in the back, but we've also emailed them to everyone, and we had them available Wednesday night. We are studying the book of Ecclesiastes and how power is a topic within this particular book, how it plays out. Let me go ahead and give you the topic for Wednesday night so I can start to help you start getting prepared. Look in Ecclesiastes and what Ecclesiastes says about death. Death. D-E-A-T-H. It's a prominent theme within Ecclesiastes. And you can take it however direction you want because there's various ways it can go. So Ecclesiastes and death. And so just look up passages and be ready to discuss the passages in Ecclesiastes on death. We are this morning finishing Ecclesiastes and power. And when you look at the list that I gave you, it's filled. And that's because this is part of the vanity or the futility within the life of this king, this teacher. Even though he's the one that's in power, having power does not guarantee you control over things necessarily. And so that's one of his frustrations. But he talks about others that are in power also. And so I thought we would go back to a passage that we'd already talked about and combine it with a Sunday night class we recently did on how to study and see where we can go with this. Everybody look at Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 7, please. Sometimes I forget to say please, and I just tell you where to turn. When I was about 18, 19 years old, some older lady came up to me and said, "It's nicer to say please." And so that's always stuck with me, but I don't always do it. But when I don't do it, it's like, remember, say please, that's nice. So please turn to Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 7. Okay, surely the practice of extortion turns a wise person into a fool, and a bribe corrupts the mind. So when we learn how to study, the first step was observation. And the version that I read from is the CSB. Part of observing is looking at other translations. So does anybody have a translation that says anything different than the CSB? I'll read it again. Surely the practice of extortion turns a wise person into a fool, and a bribe corrupts the mind. Janet?
Oppression makes a wise man mad, and a bribe.
Okay, so oppression instead of extortion. Anybody,
part is the same as what she had, but the last part is, and a gift destroying the heart.
A gift, okay. That's going on the definition. Both of those are looking at definitions of the Hebrews that could be said oppression or extortion for the first one, and bribe or gift for the second one. Anybody else have something different? A different translation has different words as we observe the text. Okay, this would be basically, as you observe the text, a Hebraism in the sense of parallelism, where the first and the second part are basically saying the same thing. So let's ask this question as we are observing. Is what is going on in chapter 7, verse 7, is it positive or negative? Yeah, it's negative, okay? So we're observing that whatever is going on in chapter 7 is not what a wise person would do. So we're looking at this. We've got the practice of extortion or oppression. We've got a wise person that's probably like a judge into a fool, somebody that doesn't practice wisdom, and a bribe or a gift corrupts the mind, the way that we think. Okay, so when we interpret this, which is the second step, life under the sun means that the powerful can be oppressed or extorted or bribed. And those that are guilty of accepting a blackmail or accepting bribery or being blackmailed, they are being swayed by others that are powerful too. So the powerful can be influenced by the powerful in a negative way. And so here's an example also of how the oppressed can go without comfort, as we talked about already in chapter 4, verse 1. Had a really good discussion on that Wednesday night. So that's basically the interpretation, where you have the powerful can be corrupted, and even the powerful who are corrupted can be corrupted by those that are more powerful than them. Whatever is going on is negative. You have the oppression or the extortion, and you've got bribery or a gift going on. So let's make some applications, because that's the third step. Yes, sir.
Bribery gift is a paradox to me.
It's what, I understand what you were saying, but go ahead and explain why you're saying that.
It just does. Bribery is, we bribe our children to eat asparagus, you know, order for every piece of asparagus you eat on your plate.
I'll make that deal with you.
Vegetables, I'll give you $1.
Right.
Now, is that a gift or is that a bribe?
Yeah.
And what is the effect on the child other than, you know, as he gets older, he's going to learn to like asparagus anyway. So
The key here, and this is part of observing, is that a word only has meaning according to its context. Janet.
Then a gift can turn into a bribe. Let's say, for instance, there's a politician and someone gives him a gift, but then he likes that gift, so then he tries to ingratiate himself to that person.
When you look at how this word is used, and Leon, read your version.
Surely the oppression maketh a wise man mad, and the gift destroyeth the heart.
Okay. So the key here is this gift does what? Destroys the heart. So this gift is, that's why this translation said, well, that's not how we would use the word gift. We would use the word bribe. And a bribe is a type of gift, isn't it? So a gift can be a positive thing, or a gift can be a negative thing when it does things that are destructive, or has, for example, strings attached to it. And sometimes a bribe will even be called a gift. I'm just giving gifts. That's all I'm doing. Yeah.
good and bad.
Yeah, it's a good and bad gift. Okay, so we've observed the text, defined words, we've interpreted it, it's negative. Even the powerful can have the powerful sway them. But what's the application? How would you apply this verse to today? Janet?
I think we need to make sure we guard our hearts, that we don't give into the temptation of wanting more than what we have, so that if someone were to come along and give us something or offer to give us something that does have strings attached, we won't be tempted to accept that and go along with it.
Okay, good. Anybody else? What's an application we can make to today? Okay, let me ask you this question. Does bribery or blackmail only come in the form of money? Okay. So, in an application, could somebody use words to bribe someone? Yeah.
Coercion.
What was that?
Isn't that coercion?
Yes, it is. So they can use, when it's negative like blackmail, it'd be coercion. If you look at bribery in the sense of words that could flatter, don't people use the flattering words to get their way? Okay, so this is an application of this. It's not the interpretation, it's not the observation, it's an application. The reason why I'm doing this is somebody came up to me after the class we did on observation, interpretation, and application on how to study. And they said, I think that this is an interpretation, right? He said, and I told him, said, no. What you're doing is you've jumped over the interpretation and made the application. And so I'm helping him learn how to study. And so I thought that this would be a good verse to do that on. Can anybody think of any other applications where somebody is blackmailed or bribed, whether by money or by words or by other means? Janet?
I think this gets to the heart of an understanding as to why perhaps people commit adultery. You know, you could have male or female say or do things that could trigger that same effect.
Okay. Not only money, but words can turn a wise person into a fool, or corrupt the mind. Anybody else? I've got one, but I'm waiting to see if anybody else gets it. Not likely.
Not likely.
Can this exist, blackmail or bribery, in a church? Yeah. Let me give you some scenarios, because I presented this to somebody and they went, I'm not so sure about that one, Perry. And then when I gave them more specifics, they went, oh yeah. But we don't normally think of it in the sense of oppression, coercion, blackmail, bribery, and so forth. Okay, can this happen in a congregation where you have both rich and poor people? That happens oftentimes. And the rich threaten the elders of the church that if the decision is not acceptable to them, if they don't like what's going to go on, I'm going to stop my contribution. Y'all ever heard of that happening?
Happens often.
Yeah, it happens. So when somebody who is rich says, if I don't like this decision, y'all are not going to get my money. What is that? It's blackmail, isn't it?
I'd announce to the congregation and mark him and avoid him. That's what I do. That's just me. That's not the Christian spirit.
It is not. But does it happen? It does. How so?
Well, the influence of one person, even though they may not be wealthy, can certainly spread among the congregation because this influence tends to be more powerful than what their dollar assets are.
And that's where we could go into, the words, the relationships. People can use their relationships to blackmail a congregation or even to bribe a congregation. This can go on in every single social construct that there is. Janet.
Going along with what Tom said, you have situations where there could be someone who it's not a sin and they can't say that it's a sin, that they don't like something and they get upset. And it gets to the point where people say, well, the congregation's trying to make a decision or something. Well, we better not do that because that's going to upset so-and-so.
Yeah. Anybody else? What I was trying to do with this verse is to show you how applicable this still is today. Whether it's money, whether it's popularity, whether it is, have you ever seen somebody in a congregation that was good at getting people on their sides and starting cliques and things like that? Yeah. And sometimes people you never would expect
to be influenced by them, somehow got influenced.
Well, why? Well, because words can coerce, bribe, blackmail, so on and so forth. Mark?
Well, not that this would ever happen here in the future, but I'm confident many churches have this issue that's come up even in the selection of a new preacher, is because...
And that's not going to happen here in the near future.
I don't think it should happen for 20 years anyway. But you think about that as people begin to start, if you're not careful, following the preacher or the teacher or the elder or what have you. Someone will come to a class because of the teacher not teaching. And that's not smart, because who you're offending is God, not that preacher.
Yeah.
Okay? Or that teacher. And so we all have to be careful that we're not following the man, but we're following the master. And so regardless of who is in a position of leadership or what have you, they even have to be very careful of that as well. And so it's a challenge when we see that people will put their emphasis on who they want to be in a position, whether it's an elder or even a deacon. Some say that there have been some elders put in position because that's to make the numbers work. Well, how wrong is that? You know, is that a qualification?
To make the numbers work, I don't understand.
Instead of having one,
Oh, okay, got it.
you got two because this person don't want to be in it. You know, there again, it's just a matter of I'll do this for this. And if our attitude is wrong, is God well pleased? We've got to all be careful of that. And this could be a sense of coercion even in those situations or circumstances.
Yeah. The idea
Of oppression, bribery, or blackmail, money, withhold contribution, or I'll stop coming, or I'll cause trouble, or you'll make me mad, you know, various ways that it destroys and turns wise people into fools. So this is a very applicable verse, which is one of the things I wanted to point out. Yes, sir, Paul.
This is kind of a variation, but I know of an occasion where a respected member of the community, a respected business owner, was in politics, and something came up that he was wanting to vote for, but the opposition started a rumor that he had accepted a bribe to vote the way that he thought he really should vote. So he said, I'll never run again. It's my reputation. I'm not going to stand it.
rumors can be blackmailed. They really can.
Anybody else? Yes.
I have a question about what Mark was talking about, and it's going off course just a little bit, but when you like the way someone teaches or preaches, is that wrong? Although you're not like following them, but does it put you in a situation when you enjoy the way a preacher or a teacher teaches?
Mark?
Because I've been in both. Well, that's a great question. I say absolutely not to that question, the way it is proposed, as it's presented. You know, because I happen to like Perry's preaching. Some days I happen to not like Perry's preaching. It just depends on the day.
What's the ratio, Mark?
Well, it's higher. No, to be serious, as you think about people jumping ship because they hear somebody's coming down the street or what have you, and then all of a sudden they bail on their family, to me, that's a bad decision. But again, you've got to look at what the preacher's preaching. Is he preaching truth? Is he doing what's right? And we have great teachers sitting in the pews right now. But I tell you what, it's a challenge to keep our minds focused on what the teacher's saying versus who the person is. So that's where we got to make the distinction. God never says that we, not everybody loved Paul, but some were promoting Paul to be the Christ. That's where he says, You know, those of you who say, I'm a Paul or Cephas or what have you, be sure that your focus is on the master and not the messenger.
Mark? I mean, Frank?
I'm a simple man. We come in here to be spiritually fed. Okay? And if I'm a self-respecting, and to use another analogy, if I'm a self-respecting cook, it's important is how I present the meal. If I throw it out there and there it is, and take it or leave it, it's not going to be enjoyable. You know? And it behooves the teacher, the preacher, the song leader, the prayer leader to present the spiritual gift in a way that would please God. Amen. See, and when we as you said, look at God, and if we do our best, whatever it is, whether it's usher, whether it's a table talk, whether it's a sermon, whether it's whatever, we've got to put the food out there, and so everybody will enjoy it.
One of the dangers and along this line is that
A preacher can use his words and his personality, his gifts, to actually turn people away from the truth. And that's the most dangerous aspect of following a preacher. When it's like, whatever you believe is what that preacher believes. Then you're...
Yeah.
If it doesn't say that, what God says, we need to leave that church.
I really hope nobody here ever, because I know you don't already, I hope nobody here ever
or never has a problem with disagreeing with me.
Think about the Bible examples of congregation wreckers.
Oh, they're there.
Yeah.
The reason why I'm using me is we're talking about preachers even today. And so I'm a preacher today. And I knew this one preacher where somebody told me, and we're going to go on, they said, nobody in the entire congregation is brave enough to disagree with anything that he says. That's bad. That is really bad. In fact, I am comforted when somebody in the congregation disagrees with me. And I'm thrilled when somebody actually does agree with me. But I'm comforted because you're thinking on yourself. And I'd rather have that happen. Anybody else on this before we go on?
Yes?
There.
In verse 7 here, for precious makes the wise men mad, and a pride corrupts the heart. Well, ain't know what Satan did to Jesus? He was trying to bribe him twice.
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting here is, you know, this is from Satan.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. That's a very good point. Anybody else?
Ash?
Then we're going on.
I was just going to say the whole situation of following the preacher and or not following the preacher. You have somebody who go to that church and you don't like what they're saying. I think we should be, like you said, brave enough to go up and say, hey, it doesn't connect with what you said. That way that person doesn't lose their soul. They should be able to study and be like, oh yeah, I'm going to fix that. Instead of just being like, I'm not going there anymore, I'm leaving. You know, because you want to help each person get to heaven.
Absolutely. So when we look at
Observation, we got definitions. We looked at the interpretation. We found out that this is negative. And it can happen even to the powerful. The powerful can be swayed by those that are in power themselves. And when we did those two things, then it set the stage for us to do the application. And we found out that this is very applicable even today. Whether it be money, whether it be words, whether it be influence, personality, or what, but it is very applicable even today. So I wanted to use that as an example because of what somebody approached me about, combining that class with this class. Okay, let's go on to chapter 8 and verse 8. Now, this verse will be good for you to remember for Wednesday night also. But no one has authority, and this is right after talking about kings. Keep the king's command, verse 2. Verse 4, the king's word is authoritative. Verse 5, the one who keeps a command will not experience anything harmful. And then you get to verse 8, no one has authority over the wind to restrain it, and there is no authority over the day of death. No one is discharged during a battle, and wickedness will not allow those who practice it to escape. So very proverbial. Tell me a phrase that happens often within Ecclesiastes that goes along with this one. No one has authority over the wind.
There's a common phrase that's used.
Striving.
Yeah, striving after the wind, grasping after the wind. So you can't do it. How many of you have ever been in a tornado? Okay, hurricane. Storm C. Any other kind of windstorms? Yes, Bruce.
Blizzard.
Blizzard.
And when you say in, are you talking about inside? Because I've been inside the middle of a hurricane, and I hate to be inside the middle of a tornado.
Suffering from. Experiencing.
Is what I mean by in. So a lot of you have experienced tornadoes, hurricanes, storms on the sea, blizzards, and none of y'all just said, stop it, to the wind?
You pray a lot. Okay, now, hopefully your mind
Just went someplace else when I said, you've experienced these storms. One was on the water that we gave. None of you just said, stop it. Your mind should go to what in the New Testament?
Jesus. Yeah. And what did he say?
Peace be still.
That's right, which is another way of saying stop it. Peace be still. Now, he had the power. He's the creator. None of us do, because we are all living life where, according to Ecclesiastes? Under the sun. And you look at this,
And no one has authority over the day of their death. Somebody said in a recent class, I think it might have been you, Paul, I don't want to know the day of my death.
and nobody is discharged in the middle of a battle. Okay, your sword, we'll go back to old times, your sword, battling, because that's the time this will be. And all of a sudden you tell the guy that's battling, I'm tired. I'm just going to quit.
What happens if you say that?
You're dead. you got quitted.
And then finally, a proverb, wickedness will not allow the one to practice it to escape. And that's the ultimate scene of judgment. Janet.
Your thing about the battle, we were talking about that, made me think about how we have the armor of God on and how we're supposed to battle, and that all of the equipment is given for approaching the enemy. None of it is for turning around and running away from the enemy.
I forget which army it was that basically, it refused to put any armor on the back. They didn't want you to have any armor on the back because they didn't want you turning your back. Okay, let's go to another
application. We've been looking at these verses, and we have observed them, we've interpreted them, and in a sense of application, what is social justice? How many of you have heard the phrase social justice?
within the last 5 years or so.
Every day, just about.
Yes. Very, very common. Now,
How you define a term determines whether it's good or bad, right?
which we learned with the word gift or bribe. Gift sounds good.
But let me give you a little exercise. Here, I'd like to give you a gift. Here, I'd like to give you a gift. When you put quotation marks around it and you change your tone, you change the definition of the word, right? That's often how that
Works. And then that, here's a gift, turns into a bribe, something negative. So, what experiences do you have?
have, both positive and negative, in reference to power utilized in our society under the title of social justice. Who would like to go first? Frank.
Based on what we've already said, it seems to me that the topic of social justice is striving against the wind.
Okay?
Now, you got to define it. When we talk with our Mormon friends, and you get on real hard about the Bible, they start quoting John Smith. See? So, what, you know, and you just...
No, you're absolutely right. You have to define terms. Does the Bible affirm that justice is good?
Yes.
Does the Bible affirm that societies need to be just? Yeah, both of those are true. Does that necessarily mean the same thing when people use the term social justice? No. So you got to ask them, what do you mean by that? I mean, I'm not against social justice depending on how you define it.
And that's what it comes down to.
Realm of shaman.
You're about to explain that one.
Shaman?
Oh, Shema. Okay, Shema. We got it, yes. Right.
Yeah.
Deuteronomy 6:4. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the only way it works.
Got to put God first, and when you put God first, that allows you to put your neighbors before yourself. Jan.
To give a personal example of this, when I had my bakery, I had issues, not once, not twice, but several times, where I was approached by individuals wanting to have a, how should we say, a cake made for individuals of the same sex. And I had to turn those down. Or if I figured it out, I'd say I don't make those types of cakes. And I knew it was just a matter of time before I was going to get in trouble with some kind of lawsuit or something brought about me because of the definition of what our freedoms are and how social justice is warping that.
Anybody else?
Good thing you don't live in Colorado.
Because that did happen in Colorado. Went all the way to Supreme Court.
There's a manufacturing crisis too. We'll get into that.
Still like they don't get out of
So here's a definition.
Of social justice. You tell me good or bad, agree or disagree. Or you just might say, I don't know, because one of the things I've learned is sometimes people define things in a way that they don't want you to understand. Social justice is sometimes understood as distributed justice. That is the fair and equitable distribution of social, political, and economic benefits and burdens.
Good or bad, or you don't know.
Depends on the fair.
Yeah, fair is defined so many different ways as well.
Yeah, fair has a definition.
Well, we don't have a definition. It is fair. But it all depends on, okay, if you get into burdens, equitable burdens, then it all depends on what stratosphere you're in, because your burden might be much more so than somebody else's. So are you sharing that burden with them, even though they might not be in the same socioeconomic strata you are? The point is, it all depends on where you're located in that definition.
Okay.
Chris?
I guess it depends on what we're talking. You said distributed, but I think maybe in some cases we're talking redistributed, which would kind of change things.
I just went on the definition that was on the website, but
Redistribution of wealth is, I think, a phrase that would go along with what you're saying, redistributed justice. Yeah.
I understand what people mean when they say equitable. I think it doesn't mean equal, but it kind of seems like it's very fluid. You can make it mean what you want it to mean.
that's again, we have to define words.
Words, because they can go in different directions. Yes, Paul?
One misuse I feel like is kind of like some of the things that's been said, but it's equality of outcome. You can know two people that born in the same neighborhood, had the same education, everything you would think would be the same. But one turns out well off and the other one doesn't. So the one that turns out well off, should he redistribute his wealth? One that had the same opportunity.
See, equal opportunity
Versus equal outcome.
Let me ask you this
Question. In a congregation,
question. Do you have
equal outcome in the sense of everyone is gifted from God exactly the same?
You don't. So even God doesn't go for
The concept of equal outcome. Because people are gifted by God in different ways. And is that good for the body of Christ?
Yeah. In 2 Corinthians chapter 8 and chapter 9.
But this particular passage is in 2 Corinthians chapter 8. Everybody get your Bibles and turn there. Yeah, chapter 8, please. Okay, you look at verse, verse 14. Well, let me go back. And again, this shows you the definition has to be given. Verse 12. For if the eagerness is there, the gift is acceptable according to what a person has, not according to what he does not have. It is not that there should be relief for others and hardship for you, but it is a question of equality. Now, how's the text going to define equality? At the present time, your surplus is available for their need, so that their abundance, which is ironic, their abundance of being poor, may in turn meet your need. So he's turning it upside down, in order that there may be equality. As it is written, the person who had much did not have too much, and the person who had little did not have too little. So there's an example of, quote, equality in giving, but it wasn't the sense of everyone had to have the exact same amount. You had what you needed, and I like how Paul, through the Holy Spirit, turns this upside down, and that is the one who has a lot now has a need. That need is to share. And those that don't have a lot, they have a surplus of poverty. But what it goes into then is This is not to take everything away from you, but it is to, you share so everyone has enough, but not that everybody's going to have everything that they want. Jared.
Well, I only got 5 minutes, so I'm gonna very quickly go through this. But oftentimes when we talk about social justice, we get into a lot of debates, and that are typically political in nature, and you tend to have people on both sides arguing from perspectives that are maybe based in some belief from Scripture, probably based in some beliefs about your personal beliefs. It's kind of a mix, and it's not great, in my opinion. I want to turn to Isaiah for a second. And I want to look at prophecy to Judah. In Isaiah, chapter 1, he says, "Wash yourselves, make yourselves clean, remove the evil of your doings from before my eyes. Cease to do evil, learn to do good, seek justice, rescue the oppressed, defend the orphan, plead for the widow." And then a few verses later it says, "If you're willing and obedient, you shall eat the good of the land. But if you refuse and rebel, you shall be devoured by the sword, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken."
Is that Isaiah 1?
Yes.
Okay.
To me, it is very, very clear that God, through the promise of utter destruction, has commanded us to, or has commanded Judah in this particular case, to seek justice, rescue the oppressed, defend the orphan, and plead for the widow. Every conversation about social justice and equality and equity and all of this should start from an understanding that God calls us to do this in some way.
Right.
How we go about it, it gets messy. It does get messy. You got people that say all taxation is theft. You got people that say we should, eat the rich, whatever, right? But if our core in which we come to this conversation is not rooted in the fact that God very clearly through his word and through his prophecies has said oppression is wrong and those who cannot defend themselves should be defended, then we are coming from an incorrect baseline, I would suggest. I would suggest that everything's got to come from that. It's okay for us to debate. It's okay for us to talk about it. And in fact, in verse 18, he says, "Come, now, let us argue it out." Right? It's okay for us to talk about it. But we have got to at least start from the baseline that God is looking for justice, for the relief from oppression, and for those who cannot stand for themselves, have people stand for them.
That is one of the hallmarks of what the gospel is. None of us could stand on our own. All of us were oppressed by sin. So the Father sent his Son to rescue us because he was just. And so you're absolutely correct, which is why we got to remember God is for justice. God is for societies being just. How we define that and work that out is messy. But it starts with we've got to be for justice itself. Leon.
I don't think social justice today is for what you said. It wasn't, it's great. But it seems to me like there's a lot of people saying, this group was wrong, therefore I'm going to wrong you to make it right.
Yeah. A lot of secular versions of social justice are based on resentment.
Yeah. And one of the things that we hinted at Wednesday night was that you can't take away one person's justice or justice. You can't take one person's justice away from them in order to be just to someone else, because that's a negation of what you're all about, being just.
But you go and look at the rules for example, for slaves and taking from slave owners and giving them to slaves. In ancient Near East,
times, in scriptural contexts, you do see people being relieved of things that they have to find justice.
Relieved is an interesting euphemism. More.
At the end of the day, though, vengeance belongs to the Lord. That should be on him and not on us to make that judgment. But as the conversation is going, there's a disconnect between today's societal idea of social justice versus God's rule and his idea of justice.
Here's something for you to look at, something I'm very much in favor of, which goes along with this, called restorative justice. Do a little study on that. I think it's worth considering as a part of our penal society. Restorative justice. Thank you, everyone. So Wednesday night, what topic are we studying in Ecclesiastes? Death. Aren't you all happy?